Hi, this is episode 2 of Unpublishables. I am Mark. This is Selene. Um, I wanted to add, Selene started with a sort of introduction last time to some of the things we're doing here, and I think I want to take a crack at it too. So I would say we want to deal with stuff, books, fiction, etc., that has a hard time finding a place and a hearing and a venue. But beyond that, we also want to deal with questions that maybe are not normally posed to authors, being willing to joust a little bit with the guest, being willing to get into what's maybe not positive about something, and to deal with those sort of interstitial spaces. So one thing I was thinking about is that, so therefore, we're not just talking about fiction, we're also talking about criticism, right? The negative review, for instance, which is something that has been sort of, I think, a topic in the last few weeks online about the idea, what are the risks? What makes a review somewhat unpublishable? For what reasons? And I was thinking, there's obviously the gatekeeping kind, right? Where the editors are the ones who sort of stop the publication of something because of whatever, let people enjoy things, optimism, that sort of thing, right? And so we have that. But then there's also just like the social repercussions of a negative review, particularly a professional negative review, which I think are like maybe deeper now. I mean, than they were in the past, in the stickiness of the internet, right? The review, whenever you look up the target of that, say the hatchet job or the negative review, it's there. It's there with that person's name. So there's a kind of social consequence, right? That maybe in the old days, oh, you blow somebody up, and a couple of months later, nobody's thinking about it, right? So I'm sort of curious about for this latest round online, right? With Valerie Stivers and Annika Levy. So what did you make of this yourself, Selene?
Uh, I mean, I think we were both in agreement that people were being too mean to Stivers, you know. It might have been a bit of a generational cultural disconnect. I think she was being earnest, not passive aggressive, as many accused, I think. And my crack at it was, if you're going to post an honest takedown of a bad work, it's undignified for somebody to maybe cover their bases with a "oh, this is painful for me too" sentiment, pretty strongly
Okay.
implying that if the work's author does better next time, she'll be graced with a good turn in the future, which was a
Did that
direct
did that
quote. Yeah.
did that? Oh, okay. Well, I was thinking about this though. Given the kind of, I mean, I don't review books anymore, but uh, if I were to review, I could completely see. I can't speak for Valerie. I don't know what her state of mind and the particulars of this particular DM, but I could totally see wanting to separate these two things and saying, "Look, hey man, I just wanted to give you a heads up. I'm about to blow you up with on this book. I don't expect you to be happy about that, but I also don't take this to be a criticism of you as a person, the context." I could totally see sending that message and not seeing any contradiction in that. And there were people who seemed to say, "Oh, you're so cowardly. I thought you were bold by, saying you're going to do this negative review, but you're not so bold because of this." It's like, no, no, no. I'm what's bold is the review. The criticism of the book may be bold and pure and etc. But that has nothing to do with the criticism of the person. It's just there was this kind of flow beyond. It's like they were like, "Oh, we got you." There was no gotcha here in that sense because it's like, yeah, the book review is still pure. I savaged you. That's done. That doesn't say anything about my personal feelings about you or the other. Now, on the other hand, as you say, you're sort of suggesting in this particular case, she did seem kind of grovelly. Is that what right?
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, as far as I can tell, they were friends before. That does introduce some obligation, like you were saying, to do something. Maybe this was an overreach, but
I don't even say it's not necessarily an obligation, but I don't think there's anything. There's no gotcha. It's like, yeah, bro,
yeah, yeah.
I hate your book. I hate your book, and at the same time, I think you're an okay person. Like this isn't. I also think in today's criticism, so much is ad hominem. The idea, anything you say about somebody is almost taken as a personal attack because of the way the culture is now. That separating work and never mind art, but work and the person in any context, an essay, criticism, we immediately take it in this sort of very personal kind of way, as a personal attack, where it's like, no, this is a critical attack. And if I have a personal attack, that would be a separate issue. Maybe I do. Maybe I also hate you. But I could easily hate this book and be like, yeah, you're a cool dude. Actually, I know plenty of people I hate their books because I hate almost all books. But I still think they're like interesting people. I don't mind hanging out with them. Like that doesn't. That's. I just feel like a lot of the comments were like they couldn't even leave room for the idea that these are two things, right? And that you
Yeah,
might
yeah,
want to
no.
tell somebody, especially in your own community, right? Literary world. Hey, I did by doing the honest and conducting myself with integrity. I had to say what I had to say about your book, but that doesn't mean X, Y, and Z about you. Now, what happens from there? Of course, the person is free to say, I thought Annika's response was perfectly legit. Like, well, fuck you. Like, that's a useless venue. And maybe it is. I don't know. But I just thought there should be room for that idea that, like, you could say that you could split those two, and it's not inherently hypocritical. And people were suggesting hypocrisy is all I'm saying. I mean, what is your take on this?
I mean, I didn't
Does
see
it have to be
anybody
hypocritical?
contesting the point she was making in the review itself. I read it once or
No, but
twice.
they were
And
saying
all the
you're not courageous like you think you are. You are claiming to be courageous, but actually you're groveling. No, he's only claiming to be courageous critically and not
yeah, yeah,
on
yeah.
some personal
It
level.
ended in sort of a chat GPT call. I have the quote right here. And thus the pain, ugliness, and confusion on display in this book are at least signifiers of the complex and real. We need novels by women that explore these issues instead of merely attention seeking and regurgitating the internet. So it ends on a call that we need books by women that uh, are more about pain, I guess, rather than being a sociological comment on them. Thinking of a more cut and dry case, and the first thing that came to mind was Death Kit. I don't know if you're following. It was a
No.
smaller uh, journal website. I don't think they're a press, but they made a tweet to the effect that any review in the so-called indie ecosystem is bad. Any negative review, there should be no negative reviews. Because it's bad for the ecosystem and it hurts the sales of these fledgling struggling authors, which I think if there's an author warranting that many independently generated negative reviews, I think the most half-assed takedown is probably better for the so-called ecosystem than letting a million of these
That's
shitty books
interesting because
flourish.
the Annika case is nice because it's mainstream.
I'm generally not putting flat earth anywhere near that category.
I understand that. What I mean is her case is kind of pure because you're not destroying the ecosystem by saying something negative. You can, but still there are consequences that would discourage you. Not because, hey, that's not very sportsmanly of you. You are ruining this very fledgling tiny industry. It's like, no. This person is going to be fine. Most of her reviews are really positive, so it was kind of a
For
good
good
like
reason, yeah.
conceptually. It was a good test case.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
because it isolates the variable. What are you really scared about? And you're scared about these social consequences and like the way people over personalize and can't deal with like there are a lot. For instance, I'll put it this way: there are a lot of people who hate my books, but I don't take it personally. Oftentimes, they're still friends of mine. I'm like, you didn't really like this book, did you? And they'll be like very uncomfortable. It's okay. Don't worry about me. I'm good. I believe in my work to such a level that you could never possibly hurt me. So and then they're like, oh, thank God, like because you're right. I really don't connect with what you're doing. Like, I wish more authors could feel that way. Like, yeah, I fucking hate your work actually, but you're like a really cool dude. Like that should be a space that people felt more comfortable in. But really, I think a lot of people are so insecure that if somebody says something about your book, you're like, oh my God, how dare you? And I can understand with so much autofiction and so much of this bleed through between memoir and reportage and all these other things. It's like it all seems like one thing. Like if you attack my work, that's definitely like attacking all of my soul. And it's like, not really. Your point about the indie one was what exactly? Like the indie example. Okay. I think because it's true. Like that's an extra thing. You can damage the ecosystem. There's some truth in that. I mean, some of these presses are tiny and barely running in, maybe they need sales to some extent to survive. I mean, there's some point in that, I guess, but
But
I would
aren't
rather
negative
see the
reviews
press.
kind of
What's
uh,
that?
negative reviews tend to attract more views to begin with, if that's sort
That's
of the
true.
motivator
That's
you're
true.
up
But
against.
to be honest, I think it's even doubly a community issue because those books don't even make any money, right? Indie books. My own books are indie books. I think the indie community is even more about community than the mainstream one because there's nothing else in it but the small set of readers of these books, readers, and they're often writers as well, reading each other's work. It's a little bit like the poetry community or something in this regard. So it becomes very, very personal, I think. And so it only amplifies the issue we'd be talking about with Onega, which is it's, oh, it becomes this really offensive thing. But again, I'm like, no, man, I hate your book. I didn't say we can't hang out. You might not, you might be pissed that I hate your book, but you might hate mine. And couldn't we hate each other's books and still hang?
Right, yeah.
I totally think that's a legit space because I write stuff that if a certain number of people aren't hating it, I'd be disappointed. Actually, it kind of amuses me when people don't like it. Actually, and I'm quite proud of, for instance, of my 2.63 on Goodreads for my first novel. It's like it's nice people in there. Some say this guy
Flatten the
sounds
curve,
like a
brother.
terrorist. This guy sounds like a racist. This guy sounds like a misogynist. It's all quite amusing to me. And I wish more people had the confidence to be like, please go on. What else do you think of it?
Yeah.
It's like it really shouldn't be a big deal. I think people are their egos have become very, very fragile, and I think that's part of it. So, I mean, speaking in terms of today's guest, right, Harris Lahti, who we will bring on shortly, he had a sort of mega tweet about his own recent novel, Foreclosure Gothic, which what was the tweet? I've never seen a novel with such a low rating, and I think it got like 4 or 5 million views. And then there was a person who retweeted it with a comment saying, because the Goodreads comments, the non-professional reviewers on the other, instead of the professional reviewers, actually feel very free, right? Because they aren't part of a small community. They can take down an author without feeling like, oh, I won't get invited to that party next week, because then they were never going to be invited. They're probably living in another country. So there's a freedom to the Goodreads review, which is kind of cool. Like that's the place they'll call you a terrorist. Somebody in New York is not likely to say that to me because it could be a problem, in the literary world, right? But a rando, it gives him freedom. He's like, I don't give a fuck what you think because you have no bearing on my social life. So I like that about Goodreads. I think we all get a kick out of it. I see people repost their worst Goodreads reviews because you see the freedom, right? Or is that not
You're
true?
saying there's like an exemption from the literary social credit score.
I mean, there absolutely is, right? I mean, they're not part of that world. They're plumbers and doctors and lawyers. They're not integrated into the New York bubble or whatever the literary bubble. So they are free. Now, a lot of them are absolutely moronic. They're terrible readers. That goes without saying, and everybody knows that about Goodreads. But the one feature it has is that there is, through the non-professional review, is that there's the freedom. Like there is no social consequence. Like I can dog this guy. Many are anonymous anyways. You can't. It's not like you can find who this particular Goodreads reviewer is. So it does give them freedom. But anyway, the recurring comment with Harris was, I guess the book is supposed to be, some people had this impression it was supposed to be very terrifying, like it was a classic horror book. And they were upset that this wasn't happening. They weren't getting the jump scares, I guess, that they wanted.
I did see a surprising amount of engagement. This was in the early stages of the tweet. I guess it took off after that, but it was from, like book talk horror romantasy people, and their gripe with it was that the twist at the end wasn't scary enough, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I actually wrote. I'm going to ask Harris about this. I wrote Harris about this before he ever tweeted that, saying one of the things I want to ask you about is why all these Goodreads people are saying this book, in many respects, is not scary enough. That there were many opportunities early on that seem like undeveloped, right? That throughout, and we'll get into the specifics when we bring him on. But I just thought it was interesting that like this person retweeted saying, no, I actually found it really scary and terrifying. It was classic horror. You just missed it. Rather than I would have thought, what about most of the professional reviewers never took this up. They took a completely different direction. Like this isn't really a horror book. Grow up. And so I just thought that was an interesting dynamic that the tweet that even blew up around this book was defending it on horror genre grounds, whereas I too personally took it in a different direction. But okay, saying all that, I think at this point we should probably um, turn to Harris himself.
Welcome, Harris. Thanks for coming on. To listeners, Harris Lahti is a writer whose short stories have appeared in Bomb, Southwest Review, New York Tyrant, rest in peace. He's co-founded the indie press Cash for Cold Books and is a fiction editor for Fence magazine. Yeah, welcome. Harris,
Hey.
is it true that you are the only author on Goodreads with a negative rating?
Well, not for the effort of trying, but yeah, I think it's true. I'm trying to own the negative reviews a little bit, but after that tweet went viral, actually it's been ticking up, and it's like teetering on the edge of going back into like the threes,
I
and
know because
I feel a little mixed about it.
no, because you had that. I mean, also let's another issue. I mean, the sales must be amazing right now for you. Don't lie, man.
I'm not.
I mean, it doesn't matter what, as we know, any publicity is gonna. And you, this is like your tweet was like 5 million views. The retweet, which was defending the frighteningness and jump scariness of your book, right? You know what I'm talking about? That I
Oh
mean,
yeah, for sure.
if you take
Right,
that's why you're right.
is actually the high beams from the Humvees you've been able to buy with your new profits.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Villainous
I think the question is like if I get to do it again kind of thing at this point. I don't know about profits, but yeah, that I was shocked by that. And I was kind of like doing like a little research on like how viral things go. And I was like, holy shit, there's a lot of people hyping this book up. And so I'm just basically just like waiting for it to come back around and then bite me in the ass again, where everyone's just like, I was promised nightmares,
Exactly, because not you'll get the bump from whoever that person was retweeting saying, no, I guarantee you it's actually really terrifying. Then it'll go back, that people will buy it, you'll get it. And then my own point of perspective is most of those people are going to say, wait a minute, this is still not really horror. This
Right.
isn't this. I kind of feel that retweet it's great for you in the sense of, hey, you probably sell a lot of books off of it, but I actually still think the professional reviewers tended to be more correct that if you're looking for jump scares or being frightened for days or whatever that person says after certain imagery, uh, maybe you will be in certain points and junctures, but that really isn't the thrust of this book. I mean, the genre expectations, right, on Goodreads were what were so interesting. I don't know, I'm curious, like, was your marketing team pushing this as a horror book? Maybe that's why they all think it's a fucking horror book, but it's weird because I don't see it as a horror book. Yeah.
What you said about the professional reviews, all the professional reviews completely nail what the book's doing. They kind of explain how it moves, how it's kind of like a goth song as it was described, or like just full of like portents and omens, and kind of like it's an unsettling book. So if you dig like a centimeter below the surface of any, like, first of all, like you mentioned the marketing, I'm like, what? There was no marketing that marketed my book as a horror book, except for there's a on Goodreads there's a label that just says horror. That's really the only thing. And I guess someone just looked at the cover, because the cover, like, you can't really like you can't diminish what the power of that cover. The cover is so good. I can't take no credit for it, but
the cover may have done you wrong in this sense. It's beautiful and it is horrifying in a way. Maybe the book itself is, I would call it eerie or uncanny moments of the uncanny. Yeah.
Well, but when I think about like the difference, like, Mark, this is a good question to pose. Like, the difference between like an unsettling image and a horrific image, it's kind of like the same thing, but it's something more that happens within your mind. It's like a something that's happening inside your brain, or it's like a feeling versus like anything that you can kind of like depict cleanly. It's muddy.
Well, so one thing I thought of during the book, right? A lot of the comments are about this. There are a bunch of sort of uncanny, eerie, scary moments within it, right? That they claim, right, didn't develop or didn't flower into basically a kind of jump scare kind of moment. So I'm thinking of of the two gravestones discovered in the basement, right? Or the fact that Junior is like preternaturally precocious, like, and speaks in like this very formal sentences very early, or the garbage man, right, and his wife who move in. So there are like all these little moments, right, I guess, that are definitely uncanny and weird and sort of glitchy. The language you use sort of, which is really, I think, very interesting, cycles between a relatively realistic depiction to something more surreal. Vic trying on the doctor's, method acting as a kind of sliding on of a face, and reality just changes in that way. So I just wonder what you think of those moments. Like, there are those moments throughout the book, but people seem to expect them to turn into like, what's under there? Well, the tombstones, or
Right.
Junior's a fucking monster, it turns out, and he's going to fucking destroy the town. I mean, go ahead.
Yeah, well, yeah, for me, I think, for one, I don't want to underplay like how influenced by horror I am. I really am not a literary horror guy, but I love horror films.
Okay.
And I'll watch everything. Just like that fan base, they really are like a ravenous fan base. And I would have loved to connect with them because that means like great sales. But the thing about horror that I find most interesting is like the first like 20 to 30 minutes, because it's so it provides space for the viewer to, while you're like taking in the art, you're constantly trying to figure out what it all means. And then once things kind of start like finding their rhythm and moving in the one direction, you kind of know where it's going to go and how these things proceed based on the genre. And that's the most boring part.
That is so interesting. What you like is the portentousness, right? The setup. But when it starts delivering,
but also with all books, I feel like there's a lot of authors that do this, and they're the ones like I try to learn as much as I can from, where they're like providing space for the reader to interpret constantly. So it's a much more active and engaging read. And one of the tags that I really didn't get against me on all of the shit talk, like the piles of shit talk, there was not like a lot of like did not finish, and it's like
that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
I just want to like to get you to the end is really the goal, and what you experience is what you experience. You don't have to love it, but as long as it affects you.
Yes.
And I would have loved to like ruin people's days at the beach. Like that's an awesome, noble thing for a writer to do. I think if they did it to me, I would be grateful. But the fact that everybody thinks they should enjoy a book is just a strange thing.
I mean, they essentially, the sense is I get you frustrated their desire for a certain type of narrative development. That this didn't end up being a vehicle to the flowering of fear in the right way. That it was portentous, but the portent didn't lead to whatever, the town burning up or some monstrous thing. Right.
Well, the most interesting part of those stories to me is like what's being revealed about those characters, and then like how it may or may not be carried through, and then those connections that you are then more engaged with as you're reading.
Let me turn to the professional reviews, because I thought one thing. Here's where I may be part from some of them. I think they're absolutely right, as you say, that if you were expecting like classic horror genre kind of stuff here, then you haven't read very deeply. So that's legit. Goodreads is always like that. We know that. I actually find it kind of fun that the reading is so sloppy on Goodreads that sometimes if you read enough of the reviews, like every 20th one though is like absolutely gold and says something you would never possibly consider because it's so out there. It's actually like interesting because it's like an outsider critic is in the same way as outsider art, right? But let's
that's interesting.
Yeah. But let's think about the professional reviews for a second. And I was thinking, a lot of them thematically were describing the book, as being about, a kind of coming of age of the abandonment of youthful dreams, of pipe dreams, this kind of thing. Because, the character goes through, thinking as far as Vic being a Hollywood actor, right? This very glamorous kind of lifestyle, and then sort of coming back down to earth in the way of a Bildungsroman, right? That now actually he's got to do this other thing. Similarly with Junior, I guess his dreams are of being a writer. Is that right? So, and there's a kind of deflation back to reality, right? But reconciling with the truth. But to me, I felt like the whole renovation theme, right? That is specifically, obviously, the literal part of that is house renovation, right? Turning this is also a kind of renovation of the spirit of these characters. That it's not so much it's an abandoned dream, but maybe a dream that was well abandoned. Like it ought to be for something more authentic and real, because they like connect with something that is maybe less illusory than Hollywood glamour, smoke and mirrors, less illusory even than, as I know from New York, the literary world is pretty much just as much smoke and mirrors in many respects. Right? It's like silly, it's exciting and titillating, but it is kind of empty when you get down to the end of it, right? But here they connect with a family tradition, right? The grandfather, I think, is the first in the
Right.
and so there is something like authentic that's happening to them in their abandoning the silliness of Hollywood or the writerly world for something like that they actually know and that's in their blood in some way. And I would say that some of the most moving scenes to me and most impressive scenes in the book are where you depict how they see one of these dumpy, fucked up houses and how you would fix it up. What would go for the estate sale? What would be trash? What would be, how would you price this out? There's almost a very loving approach to the way you do that. And it's very moving. Like here, they're finally doing something that's really in them and it's not for show or something like that. And I also know that you have personal experience in renovation and other things. Surely you would have drawn that eye comes partly from your own eye, right?
Oh yeah, no, Mark, I think that's actually really astute. And I say this all the time. Like right now, my wife is working full time, and so she works as a nurse. So she's like gone from like 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. So it's just me with 2 toddlers all day.
Yeah.
And there's something so freeing and kind of relieving about that because it's end to end. I cannot write. I cannot pursue my dream in this way that allows me to relax, right? And I think like there is like a certain amount of like to give up your dream. It sounds like a horrible thing, but it's also this really relieving thing because then it's like what immediate thing are you feeling that in, and it actually prevents you from kind of like living in a distant future,
yes,
and living in the now, right? So I think that's kind of like that really is now that I'm thinking about it, it's kind of like the metamorphosis of Vic, right? And it becomes something that he starts to do kind of maladaptively toward the end.
Yes.
But it's like there's that chapter where he's like trying to convince Heather that he actually is as happy as he's saying he is.
Yes.
And like there's kind of like this sense that he's maybe lying to himself, but then like his actions kind of speak for themselves where he's just like, he can't stop doing this.
It seems like he's really joyous, like even dealing with the garbage man. He's excited to work with this guy. He's our monster, he says, because he's so good at like redoing the houses in a way that's like this Vic is obviously like he's like actually doing something that's not theoretical or speculative. It's like in his bones, he's enjoying the day. Like he's like, I go to the site with this guy and he wants to call him over. And the wife was like, Heather's like, you want to be friends with him? No, he's great. This guy's great. There's real joy there. Authentic joy. I don't think it's lying to, I mean, yes, there's a layer of that, but as time goes on, the reason he doesn't want to go back to Hollywood, he's like, I'm getting a kick out of flipping these houses right now. And I'm good at it. Being good at something matters, right?
And being able to provide for your family also is like the biggest. Once you have kids, the questions of your like what you want kind of go out the window, and there's something really rewarding about kind of like continuing to like foster like your lineage, build a legacy.
Yes.
But I can speak from personal experience, like renovating houses, like if you were a writer and you want to like learn about what people go through and how their lives end and like how their lives form and end, it really is just like this really beautiful time capsule. Not to mention like the characters you meet that work for you, and you just get a slice of like every single segment of America, and it's a really kind of like good way to see the world.
Yes.
I enjoy it a lot. But yeah, I've seen all kinds of weird shit. Like most of the book, I saw speaking of Goodreads, I saw somebody on Goodreads being like, this guy's cribbing from all these Gothic traditions and all this. I'm like, bitch, this shit happened to me. Every single thing, like the weirdest part of each one of these stories, this happened.
This actually happened.
I've encountered. Yeah,
I thought the book is lovely because we're always swamped in this lately in this idea of autobiographical work and the writer talking about himself writing a book, etc. And this I'm so interested. This way of drawing on autobiography is just so much more open and rich because the book has these very surreal elements, these very mixed elements, and it's obviously not a man just self-obsessed and charting his own life, but you've drawn so productively on what, I mean, the stuff about the sweep of a house and understanding how you would re-envisage how you see the bones of it and see the possibility. That's the real dream, right? That the Hollywood dream ends up being sort of fake, but Vic has a real talent for seeing the future of these houses, right? How they would be, how they would work, and then he does it, and then he has success. So there's a kind of authenticity there that I thought was great.
There's also like a weird parallel to writing too, especially if you're like writing recursively, because I feel like these houses oftentimes are so disheveled, but then you'll find like one thing where you're like, oh, if you redo the floor, then like the bare wood of that can play off of this thing, and then it informs your other choices as you continue to go. So there's this like there is a very kind of like rich creativity, and you have to like listen to the house, like you have to listen to a story,
That totally comes through, and I thought there was I felt most gripped not by horror moments, but the moments when Vic, and then at the end, Junior, right? He's thinking. He almost feels compelled by seeing these properties. He himself gets sucked in almost with that. Instead of it being this artificial dream, I want to be a star in Hollywood, I want to be a writer. It's like, this is from the gut. Like they just look at these things and they're like, I got to do this, and that's right. Like it's more real in some way. So I've read the book twice now, and I think it's really special in the way you have mobilized this theme of renovation. If we could, Selena spent some. I mean, this is your first novel, right? And you've spent a lot of time writing short stories, right? So I'm not really a short story guy in a big way, to be honest. But Selena is. So I think she might have some things to talk about there.
Sure, man. Okay. I mean, you spent a little time talking about how the most engaging part of a horror movie is the beginning, the setting up of the expectations. There's this one story of yours that came to mind about this necklace, and they're, Vic's in it too, and Heather, I think. And they've got this mute kid who's like playing in a gravestone in the garden, and there's like quicksand breaking him in, and Heather seeing like her kid's ankles or something like flailing around, and she like yanks her kid out, and he's holding this necklace. And I don't know, man, it's easy to put pauses in a movie like a Lynch movie. You do a really, really good job, putting in a story. Like, how else do you do it? You'll have complete, a blank page, it's all pauses. But the horror almost seems to be beside the point of first these expectations for the necklace, and they pawn it off after this back and forth, and it's worth nothing. And then Heather like shoves her kid back into the quicksand, forces him to play to see if he'll yank up something else, and he doesn't. And they're at the dinner table, and he's like an autistic deaf mute or something. He doesn't talk, and the big expectation is that he's supposed to talk. At the very end, the horror is when he talks about who the hell owned the necklace before, and it was like a pregnant woman who died and was buried in the garden, and like the man hung himself, and everyone's finishing each other's sentences. And it's completely connected, but it's almost a throwaway to the real horror, which is the expectation that everyone has of itself. Same thing with your dispatches. You have these series of upstate dispatches, and they're ghosts, and some, these widows and these whoever, but all these ghosts are people who had way different expectations of the house than they did. Or, you're starting to flip houses and you're haunted by the fact that somebody didn't sign off them correctly, and now you're like $1 million in debt. I just like how bureaucratic and beside the point your horror is.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll take that. Yeah, I'll take that all day. Yeah.
The horror is the real world sort of correlates is sort of what you're saying. Yeah. That's interesting.
No, I always saw like horror, like I don't know if you guys consider like David Lynch's movies like horror films, but I definitely think that there's like a lot of like you can make an argument that like Lost Highways is a horror film, or like like some of Bolaño's works are horror.
There's this there's an oblique sense. That was
kind of like more like how I envisioned it, than like some campy slasher, which
Yeah.
I also
Which I
adore.
like,
But
and as I do too. But I
oh,
think
really?
I
You're
know
a fan of
I'm
those?
really into like all the Jason and Freddy movies, all that stuff. Even the ones that are not considered very good, I'll still watch because I'm like,
Oh, me
oh,
too. Yeah. Oh, the
you
worse
got to
the
see it,
better. Yeah.
man. This is the ultimate line extension. It's like the 18th one in this, and you're like, I still have an appetite for this, though. You know?
Yeah, yeah, it's like, well, there's something like really interesting about asking to continue to do it. You know, like how do you make something interesting on the
Yeah.
fourth or fifth time? Like one of my favorite documentaries is that have you ever seen The Five Obstructions, that Lars von Trier
I have, yeah.
Yeah.
film where he makes that guy, that short film maker, remake his film 5 times with different
That's right.
instructions each time. But that's what I feel like those sequels kind of become after a while, you know.
And I also like that I wasn't sure what angle you would take on this. I thought you might completely repudiate any connection to horror and put it more in the lineage, as you say, Lynch and Bolaño, sort of oblique horror. But it's so interesting to say, no. I love horror. It's just I love the parts before the slashing, not so much the slashing itself. And that makes sense of this book too, of Foreclosure Gothic. So that's very interesting. And so in a way, you're not totally at odds with your audience. It's like, no. We both love horror. It's just we love different parts of it, it looks like. They love the end, and you love like the beginning. And you know what I mean? Like, so your book has like a series of beginnings, the flowerings of horror. And it's like, no, that just turns out to be like, this is the other thought I had about this book. And I'll leave it there. We have other things we can talk about. But I also thought of like magical realism, because there's an element in which weird, eerie, unreal types of things happen, but they don't develop in that way. And the characters are not that troubled that, hey, I guess nothing came of that. They accept unreality as like not that freakish. And in a way, it makes sense because Vic is a Hollywood actor where everything is smoke and mirrors anyways, right? So illusion is not so crazy. So if something happens that's weird, there's an acceptance within the book that weird shit happens that doesn't lead to like gore and blood. It's just some weird stuff, like reality glitched a little there. And the book is full of those kind of glitches with realism and something eerie, some kind of other sort of spiritual world, or, and it treats it as ordinary in the way magical realism. Like it doesn't have to lead anywhere. It's just like, that's how weird life is, like.
Oh yeah, no, I think that also, like, to build off, like, that's how life is. People are like, there's irresolution, like things aren't being answered, but also like when you look back in your life and you remember things that caused you the most kind of like emotional arousal, right? But like the way that they kind of resolve themselves isn't like the thing that you like have burned into your memory, you know.
Totally.
So like that's kind of like the way that I began to think about it as it like evolved, and I think that kind of rings a little more true to me. Like a resolution kind of seems like the wrong word.
Yeah,
to me,
and it's almost not the point of real interest or intensity. The emotions and attachment are sort of heightened in a prior stage, as it were, where it's still about expectation and possibility. By the time you get to the resolution, it's like, nothing much occurred actually, but it was exciting to dream about it or think what it might have been, but it turned out to be, so something by the by kind of.
Like throwaway line, or not opposite of a throwaway. David Soleil book where you're like, life, the glitch is when, you do make your mark on life. It might even be like a delusion of modernity or modern art. Life happens to you. And that is very, like in a Chainsaw Massacre movie, the glitch is when you take the chainsaw and like cut their head off, otherwise you're kind of running away from other people's expectations and hoping not to get bitten.
Yeah. I did you guys read that book Flesh? I felt like that book kind of did something similar, which I really kind of appreciated. It didn't try to like answer any questions.
I haven't actually read that. Have you, Selene? No? Or that was the Booker winner this year, right?
Yeah, it's such a fascinating book. I really enjoy it. Yeah.
Interesting.
But your stories are also place-based. I mean, do you think you'll ever get to the point where you run it out or overshoot your load and think, I gotta, I mean, it's the Adirondacks or the Hudson Valley, right?
What do you mean? Like write about something else?
Remarks to the effect that like all good writing is local. It comes out of the air of a place.
Oh, honestly, like they're just, to tell you the truth, like I could write a book about every single house I've ever renovated, and right now what I'm working on is a story about my neighbors. Like my whole goal is to just like write this book that makes me have to move. Um, but if you guys are interested, it's kind of a funny story.
It's really
But
good.
my neighbors are this group of people called the Bruderhoffs, and like these hyper pacifists who moved here during World War II. And you think that they're like pilgrims.
Yeah,
Women wear like ankle-length skirts, like bonnets and shit. They have like a farm and everything. So like these people are just like walking by, like smiling, like growing their own wholesome food and drinking their unpasteurized milk, and they're all so happy. So I'm like writing this book about how they like terrorize this guy who lives near them with their
yeah.
goodness.
That's an unreal that even the core, the factual component of your story is itself totally crazy. Meaning it's very
Every time,
interesting.
yeah.
That's great. What a circumstance where you don't even have to go too far away from reality. It's like, no, this is a realist story.
Oh
These
yeah,
are my
no,
neighbors.
well, that's the thing. That's the thing that I'm always interested in, right? And I think you kind of identified that, where there's like these moments where it's like it's almost like magical realism.
Yeah.
It feels that way, and then you just move on. You're like, that was weird. Like, what the fuck was that?
Exactly.
You know?
That's
The worst thing
that's
they
sort of
could
a
do to you
theme in
is
some of
leave
your
you
stuff.
5 stars on Goodreads, like terrorize you.
That would suck.
Yeah. uh,
And
um,
the other thing I thought, as on a formal level, the way that even Foreclosure Gothic is like a book length work set in the present tense is a risk, right? Because it's like there's a kind of intensity or immediacy to the present tense that can kind of be a little bit exhausting. It works in the short story very easily, but in a longer form, there's a risk. But then I was thinking, reading it, like the fact is the language you use, because it is itself so rich and interesting, it kind of distances you again. It slows you down. You're paying attention to the imagery, which is always very frequently unexpected. Those glitches actually, in some way, push you back from sort of racing through the text, and it's like perfectly counterbalanced. And I think that's just an interesting theme in your fiction and also in the stuff that you edit. That people use terms like alt lit, indie lit, etc. But alt lit has a kind of association with a kind of flat down kind of style from Towel and etc. But in that sense, your writing and the things that you edit, both Fence, which we'll get into, and Cash for Gold, the press you've co-founded, are definitely not alt lit in that sense. I would just call it indie lit because there's such an attention to language, imagery, and that sort of thing. So if we could talk a little bit about, Fence is one of these venerable places, like I think of like Conjunctions and certain other places that have been going a long time on this sort of language rich, language drunk kind of work. And how long have you been there? And what do you work for, the magazine or also on the book side sometimes?
No, I never work on the book side
Okay.
of things. Just always the magazine. I've been there so I think I started at 2018. So about eight
Wow.
8 years now. I've been editing there, which you would think that it'd be a lot more work,
Yeah.
but I think maybe I've worked on like 6 issues since I've
Okay.
been there, and I did a lot of online stories. Just
Yeah.
because I had the opportunity. Essentially, it was like go
I,
crazy kind of thing.
it's. I mean, look, I'm. There are not many places that I would be interested in editing at, but that's like an exciting. I mean, it's such a storied place, and even what they've published books, or on the other side, it's like I think of like something like Otessa Moshfegh, like the only book of hers I like is the one on Fence. The
Right.
rest I don't know what the fuck happened. But this is when she was like really firing on all cylinders. I mean, Magoo. When I just looked through the catalog and I looked through the issues, I'm like, these are exciting writers really pushing themselves to their most exciting sort of elements rather than sort of giving the people what they want or something easier. It's like, I feel like it's so interesting that you're editing there, and it makes sense that you write in a way that's like definitely not the down style or the low style. It's very rich. It's complicated, a lot of unexpected turns and stuff. Like, what have you learned from being an editor, and how is it sort of filtered into like maybe your own thinking about writing? Or
Oh, that's a really good question. Yeah, so one thing I kind of think about with Fence is like it's obviously avant-garde. Um, and there was kind of like a learning curve for me when I started there. Like it's kind of a funny story. Just like the way that I got started there was Lynn Tillman was my teacher in undergraduate at SUNY Albany, which
oh,
at the time had the Writers Institute, which housed Fence.
okay,
Before very shortly after that, they parted ways, and it kind of like
Yeah.
dissolved into this weird thing. But Lynn Tillman was my teacher, and then
That's amazing on its own,
Yeah,
Harris.
I had no idea who
want to
she
start.
was.
That's even more interesting. But anyway, my start was Lynn Tillman.
Yeah,
Very-
that was my first creative writing
insane.
class, and she was brutal. She was like really, really tough editor, and I kind of responded to that. I really enjoyed working for her. I learned a lot from her. But anyway, so fast forward a few years later, I was at Sarah Lawrence, and I applied to be the fiction editor at their magazine, a job that I should have gotten. Like I was high and above like the most qualified person for it. They didn't give it to me, so I just like randomly emailed Lynn, and she was like, "Oh, I know this place where you can go." So it wasn't even like something that was really on my radar,
That's
kind
insane.
of thing. And so I got on as a reader, and I think there was like a miscommunication, and they thought that I was like an editor. So I just like pretended to do the part that they asked me to, and I went to all these meetings and like slowly ingratiated myself and kind of like proved that I wasn't just like some crackpot.
I think because of the person who was recommending you, they would have been like, "Well, Lynn wants him to be a part of this." What even your life is sounding like something you have written, Harris.
It's just like it feels like that. I like try. I'm very open to it, you know. And I'm always trying to reconfigure things in new ways. But yeah, I mean, I think people just, like generally just like I'm not like kooky, and like people want to help me, kind of thing. So it's like. That's it, you know. I think that's like is that easy, you know. Sometimes, like, but
just being open to that, yeah.
But I remember like being in the early meetings with Trey Sager was there at the time, Rav Grul Koch, who's still there, Gabriel Lewis, who isn't there anymore. Like, so it was like a lot of people that weren't there already, and they'd been doing it for a really long time. So I just kind of listened to them. But the thing that I learned about reading stories like that, like the more avant-garde and stranger, more energy or like fiction or like language driven pieces, was like trying to interact with the stories as like an art piece, and like imagining them like actually tacked up on a wall, and I'm like walking by it in a museum, because in a museum there's not any expectation to the art. They're not like divided into like fictional and non-fictional or genre or whatever. It's just kind of like you're having a very honest experience with each piece. You know, like, was that apple real that the guy painted, or was it not? You know, people don't ask those questions. So like I kind of had to learn to like, instead of like trying to edit it while I was reading and being like, this is weird, like get to the end and then feel how it made me feel. And if it moved me, then, you know, it didn't have to be like reconfigured. Like maybe it was just perfect as it is in like its raw form, you know. That's the most affecting form. So that was like what I learned the most, I think. Yeah.
Does that mean you started out writing maybe in a more straight kind of mode, and by editing here and being exposed to that, it actually did influence your because your writing isn't like that now? Certainly, it has the layers I would associate with Fence or something like that, and it isn't straight. Is that sort of what you're suggesting?
Oh yeah, 100%. And I formed like I mean, I was kind of like already like moving in that direction anyway. It just was like a very lucky coincidence, I think. Like I really blessed in a lot of ways. But you know, the guy Rav, who he just had a book come out, The Snares. We both had our debut books come out the same year, which was really cool. But he kind of took me under his wing and like was just kind of like fed me different sorts of books, and like introduced me to writers that I wouldn't generally have read. Rodrigo Ray Rosa. Have you ever read Rodrigo Ray Rosa, The African Shore? He gave me that book, and that pretty much just like changed the trajectory of my writing in so many ways. Just like interesting book.
Wait, tell so you edit on the magazine side, you're saying, and so I'm wondering. So in other words, mentally and the brain space wise, you were sort of ripe to be able to still think of a separate press, your own press, perhaps, to do book editing and take this other step of saying, okay, I do short pieces, but what about book pieces? So tell us a little bit about how Cash for Gold even came about, like.
Yeah, Cash for Gold just like happened. It was just like another one of those instances where the things kind of just like started flying up.
Amazing, Harris. You're amazing.
You can't force anything. It has to like, you just got to wait for the moment and then strike when the moment's ready. But so yeah, I met maybe you guys were at this event, the complete Gary Lutz Tyrant Party.
Oh, I wish I was at that event.
It was
No.
like
I was at it too.
2017, maybe. No, that was it 2019 maybe.
Mhm.
I forget when that book came out. But so I met John there, and I just remember there being like, it was at Murmur, that venue in New York,
Yeah.
big venue. There's like hundreds of people. There was like so much energy and affection for not only Giancarlo, but like this whole scene. It felt like something was like really happening there.
And you mean
So
John
I
Lindsay,
met
right?
John. He was like handing out flyers for John Lindsay,
Yeah.
a Body High fame. He was handing out flyers or whatever, and we just kind of like exchanged emails and we're like emailing. So we had been like trading stories for a while, and like after Giancarlo died, we both like were really upset about it, and we're kind of like mourning the loss of this lodestar that we felt that we just felt really directionless in a lot of ways. 'Cause I felt like I was always kind of like writing stories, like hoping that Jordan would publish them, or like John would like be interested in my work. Like it was like really good to have those kind of goals, you know. Right now I feel kind of listless. Like I don't even know where to point at this point for myself. But so we started talking about having a press, and this is kind of a funny, this part's really funny, but like I don't think we would have, I don't know if we would have really started it if Brian Allen Ellis and House of Vlad at that point.
Okay.
I think he kind of was like getting overwhelmed with the work of it, and was like, oh, here, I'll just give it to you guys, and you guys can run with it, and you know, it'll be yours, kind of thing. And then we had a couple meetings. I got like a nosebleed during one. It was just like kind of like a weird omen.
Mm-hmm.
And then we started like talking about doing Peter Vack's book, and he wasn't, it was like kind of waffling, and we're just like, we want, all right, we'll just do our own thing, you know. We're not going to do House of Vlad. But then Brian Allen Ellis went on like an epic run after that, and put out like 6 books or whatever.
Okay.
And like got into Urban Outfitters, and like was like really successful. So his joke was like his spite run.
I can imagine, yeah.
But then we started. John had the name Cash for Gold. We were gonna call it Dummy Books for a while.
Cash for Gold is amazing. It's a great name.
John is just so, it's so hard to like emphasize how important John was to all of this.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, so he had Cash for Gold, and
you didn't know him at the beginning, before that event, or did you?
No, I didn't. Yeah.
So
well, also like COVID happened, and over COVID, we'd spent so much time doing workshops together. We had like a few people that we were doing workshops with.
Okay.
So we were seeing each other more than I like saw my family. You know, during that whole time.
Yeah.
So it kind of solidified over that. Nathan was involved.
Okay.
Shantar Conroe. Who else was doing it with us? Jackson Franz. I'm trying to remember like names of people.
You mean, was this like a Zoom or something, or?
Yeah, we were doing it over Zoom. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
And then I was like, I don't know if I was like workshopping stories with John, but the first book for Cash for Gold was supposed to be my first book, Mental Health Professional.
Okay.
We had a cover done by Atticus Lish, and like we had it formatted, and like it was all ready to go too. And then I sold my book to Astor House, and we canned it.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So that's how it all kind of came out. So then we did Peter's book first, which was like a fucking crazy
silly way
to come in hot, you know, like that worked out way better that way.
Yeah.
Because he didn't need us to sell it. It was already like
that's what I'm thinking.
You know?
That's a great place to start. Yeah.
And his party, like the party we had for him, got so much buzz. Like there was like hundreds of people. It was so, I've never seen like a literary party like this in my entire life. I was completely blown away. We're like, all right, we got something, you know. Let's try to.
What a good place to have started, because he's drawing in even probably film people, other arts people, right? Like a whole confluence of like New York, you know.
Bravo was there filming. I'm not kidding.
There you go.
They suck, man. I got beef with Bravo. They didn't even promote his book. They tricked us into letting them come, and then they filmed all this other shit. But it's a really surreal kind of way to start it. Yeah.
Did that come about before the Suicide Anthology? That came later? Is that?
No, that came out. The Suicide Anthology was first, but that was like with House of Vlad too. So it was like,
I see. That was your baby steps, like getting to your own.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. And what? Tell us a little bit even about that anthology. It's quite like an unusual kind of work.
Yeah,
I
I
right?
actually didn't do any work for it.
Okay.
John has a much more personal relationship with the topic. So, I
I
was,
got you.
yeah,
That's hilarious. Okay.
yeah. I don't think I'm like I should be the one editing
Okay.
that book.
That's really funny. Yeah, you do say there's a kind of joy that comes through you, Harris. That I was like, so you started with suicide? Now I get it. Okay, it's your
Yeah.
other half, who I don't know John personally. So okay, now I know.
Oh yeah, no, John's great. Yeah.
Okay. And so tell us about some of the other books on the. I mean, you say your inspiration, right, in part was Giancarlo, but I feel like some of these books, could you imagine him publishing? Like I was.
Oh,
Go ahead.
That's a really interesting question.
I kind of feel like maybe not. Like he kind of specializes in that kind of somewhat gritty, direct kind of style, and some of your books fit that. So Peter's book would, but like the latest one, right? David Ryan's, like I couldn't see Giancarlo necessarily being like psyched about. I don't know.
That one, yeah, that's an interesting one for sure, and I love throwing that in there. I felt like maybe not David's book itself. David's book is doing something very interesting and different, but maybe not in the same way that some of those books were.
Yeah.
But in the spirit of like Giancarlo's catalog, I felt like he had a really good balance of like the sugar and the medicine kind of thing, where it would be like he'd have like people with personas who also wrote really good, written books that maybe weren't like as crafty.
Yeah,
but they're still interesting, and they worked as like artifacts of like a certain scene or time period, whatever.
Right. But I'm sort of paying you a compliment. Like you've extended that vision, and I'm saying it sort of bears the imprint, frankly, of something like Fence. It has a more experimental element to some of the books. I mean, even Nathan's, like some of his work is not. I mean, there's a simplicity on one level, but on another level, there's some other things going on that I just feel like when I look at Cash for Gold, and I was going down the list, I'm like, yeah, I can see Giancarlo being in the background of some of these things, but I also think you guys are doing your own thing, and it has a slightly different, more linguistically heavy spirit than a lot of the stuff that he was more like, no, I like the sort of grit, I like the scene that it documents. Your stuff is a little bit more than documentary. It's like people who really love language are
right.
part of your list, I think.
You were saying at the beginning.
Yeah, I think a lot of it flows from like an affection for Gordon Lish too. I think that it's hard to deny that Nathan's not a very like. I think Nathan's probably has like every issue of the Quarterly at his home. Like I can't name another 30-year-old that probably possesses that.
No, but Selene, you 25-year-old Selene may be in that same school. That's our resident Lishian is her. So maybe.
I lost them all in the move, man. But you were saying in the beginning that when you were starting out editing Fence, there was like a gap between writing that you saw, like recognized very well as great, but wasn't necessarily to your taste. After a while, you started, like you grew to fit the mask of thinking more in terms of language. Did that, does it have to do with short form versus long for you? Like when you're writing something short, or if you even want to at this point, is there more of a constraint, to think of it as an art object versus with longer form?
I think the only way that I could write longer from like personally is like trying to chunk it out as short stories, because that's ultimately like what Foreclosure Gothic is. It just moves linearly.
That's right.
So, you can call it a novel.
So you do have a love of the short form. That's clearly, I feel like, a feature of what you do. Like even the chapters
in a rotating cast of sort of the same characters. It is like volume 1, volume 2, volume 3.
Yeah, they could rub off each other. Well, there's something really interesting that happens, like the way that I wrote Foreclosure Gothic, and Mark as like a not like a capital N novelist, like I really wonder like how this would work. But like the way that I wrote Foreclosure Gothic is I wrote the first story and I wrote the last story. And then I continue to like synthesize elements from those two to make another one, and then another one and another. You know what I mean?
That's super. That sounds very Fence-like to me. Actually, that's quite experimental technique. You're doing some formal shit there, right there. So I gotta say, that's interesting. Yeah.
But like to write linearly, that almost feels like a death sentence or something. You know,
Right.
like if you get stuck somewhere, like where do you go? Where do you go from there? You know.
Right.
So that would be like I'm gonna write a novel. Like my next book's gonna be a novel. I'm not gonna write short stories, but like I'm gonna think about it as short stories the whole way.
Exactly.
Otherwise,
Right.
I'll fall on my face.
And so, what are you working on right now?
The Bruderhoff novel
Bruderhoff
about the
novel.
people who torture the good guy.
Like,
Yeah, it's kind of like a reimagining that book, Miss Lonely Hearts. I don't know.
oh wow!
That Nathaniel West book. Yeah, that's
I
like my
love that
favorite
book.
book in the whole wide world. It's just evil. I love like arch kind of books where you know you could sense the text kind of like enjoying the discomfort that's causing you, kind of thing.
Right.
Like Elfriede Jelinek. Like I always just kind of feel like a mouse that she's like playing with before killing, kind of thing. Or like Sir Jaggy too. I feel the same way. Like,
right. So this book, given the people you've named, likely to be on the shorter side, or
I just want to get over 200 pages.
it's a goal. It's aspirational stuff. No. And any other, what about nonfiction? Any short stories you're working on the side, or is this sort of the thing right now?
No, I've been pitching. I really want to write an essay about the uncanny in professional wrestling.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Completely out of left field, but I've like developed this like really ambivalent fandom of professional wrestling, and I've been like trying to figure out why I find it so captivating. And I'm like, I think it has to do with the uncanny, because all these people are just kind of like these weird sort of mirror images of things that I kind of recognize.
Yes. And they have like cultural touchstones that they each represent almost symbolically, like this is the American hero, and this is like this will have like a militaristic spirit, and then there'll be like a guy who's like a hippie, and with the crazy hair. It's like, what's going on symbolically within the larger field of them bringing these people together in matches, and who wins the rematch. And I grew up. I'm old enough to have grown up with Andre the Giant. Right, Hulk Hogan, the original shit, like Randy Savage, all that shit, and I always found that fascinating. I was into that shit way before I got into literature, and I agree. Like some of those characters are super compelling and very uncanny.
Yeah,
no doubt.
Oh yeah, and it's like painted like in really broad strokes. So there's something very American. And it's trying to like understand America through this warped looking glass is really like an interesting idea for me. But yeah, like Hulk Hogan would fight like the Iron Sheik when like America was at war with Iran in like the late 80s. It's like,
or like when they murked Bin Laden. I don't know if you've seen the Cena SmackDown clip. You probably have, but it was on UPN, I think, so they couldn't say like we've assassinated Bin Laden necessarily, but he stopped the wrestling match and he was like, "Ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to announce that we have compromised to a permanent end, Mr. Bin Laden." And immediately the national anthem comes on and everyone's like, it's one of the most uncanny moments I've ever seen.
No, I've never seen that. I'm going to look that up as soon as we get off. But yeah, there's like this really interesting way of like, they break the fourth wall where they're like, you're doing news announcements while these two guys are having this like pretend feud that writers wrote.
That's right. Because it's like an all-encompassing kind of spectacle where it wants to digest world events. It wants to talk about just local American events. And then there's just these personality types clashing in certain ways. And it's like, you can get behind even somebody in regular life you wouldn't side with, but like within this context, like imaginatively, you'll see the fans like cheering on like very kooky or freaky characters that would normally be like, ooh, like some, it's like there's it gives this sort of imaginative space for people who don't read literature and do all this high stuff to sort of live a kind of something like within a novelistic kind of, realm or ongoing development of a story. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, that's the most fascinating. That is the most fascinating thing about is the length of the storytelling, because this is it's like probably the longest running. Maybe there's like a soap opera or something, but like every Monday, Thursday, Saturday, or Sunday, like once a month,
right.
The story hasn't ended since you've been watching. It's been the same story, just developing and shifting and changing. And now with the fans, like they have more behind the scene access to people, so they like actually know who these people are, and they're like factoring it into the storylines, and there's just all these like weird kind of crisscrossing.
This has been really great. Thank you so much for coming on. I mean, I first met you, right? I guess you came to my backyard to read for the mag, and I've been following your writing since then more closely, and I was thrilled to see when you had this novel come out. I'm thrilled to see that the professional reception has been very enthusiastic. I'm even thrilled to see like the crazy Goodreads non-professional. It's like it's interesting because
Right.
your book
Yeah.
is confounding people, which is always interesting. I think even people, the fact that people, a large number of people misunderstand it means something interesting is happening, as opposed to it being immediately digestible. So,
Right. And
yeah,
well, and also like shout out to Asher House for putting out a book like that,
exactly.
like Deborah Geim, that the editor that I had there, and like the books that she put out there and she's going on to put out at Echo are like all, she's like the Trojan horse, for like
Right.
real lit people, so it's something that I've tried to do, and like to do it at that scale is like the fucking
Exactly, because
sweetest ever.
they
Yeah.
have the scale, the distribution, and all that. So I think it's a risk to push a book like that, but it looks like one that I think, judging from the reviews of all sorts, your book has struck a chord with people in one way or another. It's irritated some people. It's made others very enthusiastic. I certainly found it fascinating, and actually found it, as I say, to be more about redemption and renovation than failure. So it also is kind of moving coming of age, and generational even, to slip that in, right, between grandfather to father to son. So thank you so much for coming on, and I'm looking forward to the work that you've got, in the hopper right now.
Oh yeah, no, this is great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. This was fun. I wish I could go for another 3 hours. This is awesome talking to you guys.